Wow, people are still coming in.
Adam, YHDP here. Great. Well,
Let's go ahead and get started here.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Mcgrath from the Missoula Housing Authority. I'm the room host. We're really excited about this panel. I'm so excited about this panel, frankly. Want to thank quickly the Montana Continuum of Care for sponsoring this session. Please mute your lines and use the chat function. And we'll try to address the questions at the end of the session. All sessions are being recorded. Please mute your lines and turn off your video while the presenters are presenting. Click the chat icon, select all panelists and attendees, enter your name and organization and location, and you can turn your video back on during Q&A. And also it says that each of you received a whiteboard paddle. I really have one here somewhere. It looks like this. And you can, if you find something inspirational or exciting or new, write a quick adjective on the whiteboard and hold it up and let us know during Q&A time of the session. So I'm going to just continue to admit people and turn it over to Keegan.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. So this here, we have 4 of the 6 members of the Youth Action Board here with us today. And the Youth Action Board stems from the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, which is a HUD grant program. Back in 2018, Montana was awarded $3.5 million to address youth homelessness. And the YAB has been integral into all of it. So they've identified the need. They helped score all the grant applications. They've met with all the grantees. They review things. They several grantees are on this call. They've looked at policies and procedures and provided input. And if you check out their website, which I'll drop in the chat again, has kind of their goals and their values and all the things that they're working on right now. So my name's Keegan Flaherty. I'm the YHDP coordinator. So I work with the YAB, I work with the grantees, I work with HUD, just kind of a liaison between all 3 to make sure that things are rolling good. And I'm going to pass it over to Bev. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Bev. My pronouns are he and they. I'm currently based out of Missoula. Been on the YAB for like 2-ish years now.
Lily?
Hi, my name is Lily. I am 22. My pronouns are she and her. I've been a member of the YAB for a couple months now. I also am a peer navigator for the HRDC Harmony House here in Billings.
Danny?
Hi, my name is Danny. I go by she or they. I'm 19. I've lived in Missoula for about a year now. I also work with a property management company down here, and I've been working with them for over a year as well. So I've been able to build quite a big network of I've been able to build a big network within that. So that's been nice.
Awesome. And Brando.
Hi, I'm Brandon. He, him. I live in Missoula, and I've been with the YAB on, I think, coming up on a year now.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for introducing yourselves. Can each of you briefly tell us what led you to experiencing housing insecurity or homelessness and what stigmas you experienced? Danny, do you want to start?
Sure. So basically my situation, I grew up in Whitefish. My parents were together until I was almost 18. And I went on foreign exchange my sophomore year, or actually my junior year of high school. And when I got home, basically my whole life had been turned upside down. My parents were separated and my mom lost her job because of COVID. So she ended up going down to California to go live with my brother. And so I ended up staying here because I wanted to finish my senior year. And so I lived in a trailer next to our house, and I basically ran the Airbnb and everything. And then my parents decided to sell the house. So unfortunately, I lost my housing. And then some stigmas that I've experienced. You can't really tell a lot of the times that I've experienced homelessness. So it's definitely a stigma of like, oh, you don't look like someone that has experienced this, or you don't look like somebody that's gone through a hard time, you know? So that's always been something that I've experienced growing up, like, oh, your life isn't as bad as other people's lives, you know? But to every person, you know, their life is very important, so it feels like a big deal to them. So yeah, that's mostly it.
Thanks, Annie. Lily.
All right, so I grew up in a very abusive household, and I didn't really know what a healthy relationship looked like. I've experienced homelessness several times between the ages of 18 and 21. It's something I never want to experience again. Unfortunately, it's happened a couple of times to me where I lost my stable housing, or really honestly didn't have truly stable housing to begin with. But each time I ended up homeless again, I was fleeing from a domestic violence situation, and trying to find a safe place to live and begin to heal. And because I had, I didn't have those good examples set for me, I didn't really know where to begin. So I kept finding myself in these same patterns. Probably one of the biggest stigmas I have faced is outside pressure in regards to my mental health, which was really hard. For most of my life, I tried to shut out the abuse that I had suffered, and kind of similar to what Danny said, I might present like I have all my crap together. It doesn't necessarily mean that I do. But I do think that I learned how to survive, but not how to cope with the hand that I was dealt. I was ashamed when I finally reached out for help. But I ended up going to counseling, going to therapy. I got my severe complex PTSD diagnosis and like a severe anxiety diagnosis, and actually got on proper medication. Ultimately, this was the best decision I could have made for my life, but it's kind of crazy looking back, and just kind of realizing that people are not as accepting and open about mental health struggles. They just kind of expect you to figure it out. But if nobody teaches you how to do this, how are you supposed to figure it out? So yeah, that was kind of my thing.
Thanks, Lily. Bev?
Yeah. So in my like earlier life, my parents had me pretty young, and we moved around, I mean, basically like every year. So there was not a lot of like stable connection to community. And that made it really hard to, like get access to services, like as an elementary school student and like a middle school student. And also like my parents had little connections to people who weren't like family in the area. And there's a lot of like emotional abuse going on in both my parents' families dynamics. So it was always hard to like ask them for help when we needed support. And a lot of the patterns of having to move around all the time have like continued in my like early adult life too, especially with like the housing crisis going on right now. It's been, especially earlier in life, like harder to feel connected, or like secure in where we were going to stay in the next like 3 months. It was just kind of like a pattern. Stigma wise, I would say that just like having like adults, especially when I was younger, like interpret my like acting out or like being very like high energy as like just like attention seeking, but not like actually like a need for support was something that happened a lot. Like, yeah, just being seen as like a troublemaker because I'm like new to a lot of situations and like pretty high energy. Yeah, like made it pretty hard to like actually access services when they were available.
Okay, thanks. Brandon?
Yeah, well, my dad died when I was pretty young, and my mother wasn't really that great. By the time I got to high school, it was kind of like living in a crescendo with like no peak. And at one point when we were arguing, she suggested that I move out, as parents do. But that really surprised me coming from her because I really, she didn't like me doing anything really. But I had been waiting to hear those words for a really long time, so I left. I really don't think she expected me to. What?
Oh, don't worry
Oh,
about
just okay.
it.
Yeah,
Background.
but yeah, I really don't think she expected me to do it, but I did, and she called me in as like a runaway. And then I did go back for like a minute, but I don't know. It was actually preferable the other way, it seemed, because at least some of the crazed addicts seemed to care, you know? So the second time I left on my own. But yeah, no, some of the only stigmas I experienced that weren't like passive, I guess, came from like doctors and family. Because at one point I was in treatment, and there was this doctor who, I don't know, he read a little bit about my history and everything like that, and then he told me that he thought I was hopeless, like without even talking to me as I was in treatment. We talked a little bit, but I don't know. The teachers at my high school, they were really great about that sort of thing. Uh, yeah, as far as family and doctors go and everything like that, it seemed like everybody just thought I was crazy, because if I said one thing, but then an adult said another thing, it was like, what can you do?
Yeah.
But then when I wasn't in treatment, a lot of the time it just felt like I wasn't seen at all, which I think was kind of worse than just being written off.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
Brandon, my next question I think is a good segue is, what does it mean to you to be supportive of youth and young adults experiencing homelessness? And can you provide an example of someone who supported you and why it was helpful?
yeah, I think primarily like getting them in touch with the resources and environment they need to thrive, because I don't think anyone wants to feel that alone. And I think any youth in that kind of situation is, automatically far less likely to come across opportunities for future successes. So I think, like, in order to soften that blow and potentially put that power into their own hands, I think they deserve to have the means to create the stability that they missed out on. I did have help in high school. I had this English teacher. Her name was Lisa. She very clearly altered the trajectory of my life. And the fact that she taught me unconditional kindness was a thing, which is great. And her door was always open to me if I needed it. There were a lot of extracurricular programs that she had me in charge of. So a lot of my weekends and, after school and before school, I would actually spend them at school. And that sounds miserable, but it was actually a really good time, and I needed that. But yeah, she showed me there was a type of person I hadn't seen before, and it's those types of people that I aspire to be like, because I've also learned that there is more than a couple.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. Bev, what does it mean to you to be supportive of youth and provide an example?
I would say like what seemed most important to me was like when older people like actually listened to my like wants and needs.
So Bev, there's music in your background.
Mhm.
There's music going on in your background.
Oh, interesting.
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, I would say like, yeah, when adults like actually treated me like a person who has like, the ability to do some critical thinking. Yeah, I think it opened a lot of doors for just like mutual respect and understanding, and like actually asking me what I think about things. Yeah, really helped me like figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I, yeah, like also had a high school teacher who sort of demonstrated that to me. Yeah, his name was Fred. And yeah, he kind of similar to what Brandon was saying, like was always kind of available if I needed to talk about something that was like going on at home or in my personal life, but also would just like actually ask me what I thought about like what was going on in the news, or like what I actually needed, instead of just like exchanging pleasantries. Yeah, and I think that that just like human to human connection was like more important than actual like material things that I needed at that time.
Awesome, thanks. Lily, what does it mean to you?
To have somebody support you when you're going
Yeah.
through all this.
Mhm.
Yeah. So like I said before, I've unfortunately had to go through like losing my housing a couple of times. The first time when I was a senior in high school. Honestly, yeah, like my teachers, they kind of just let me graduate. I was always like a straight A student pretty much. And they knew that if I could have, I would have done all of my homework, but I was too focused on trying to survive. And so a lot of my classes, they let me just skip out on homework and would just give me a grade for it because they knew I was trying my hardest in class at least. So that was pretty huge. And I think that all of the people who have really supported me as I am trying to not be homeless anymore, they all actually took the time to get to know me, and actually cared about, and I could feel that too. Like I could feel that they actually cared about me. Two people who have really made a big difference in my life are my two caseworkers that I had at HRDC. I graduated recently out of the Harmony House and Transition in Place programs here in Billings. And yeah, my caseworkers helped me reach my goals. They actually took the time to figure out what my goals were. Were very supportive. Just asking the right questions too, like, what are you struggling with this week? How can we help you this week? And making me feel like I had a safe place to be vulnerable and actually share with them. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Lily. Danny?
So Brandon and I actually ended up going to the same high school, just a little bit apart. And I never met that teacher, but while I was there, I was in pretty close contact with the guidance counselor there. And like Brandon said, he took the trajectory of my life from going this way, no goals, no hope for the future. And he made it go the other way, where I got into college. He helped me with all of my financial aid, and he gave me a lot of resources like that convinced me to go to college and convinced me that there was more than just survival in my life. Because for a long time, especially in that situation, you're always on guard and you're always thinking about how can I survive in this immediate moment. So once you do kind of get into stable housing, it's still really important to have the therapy and mental health services, because once you're not trying to survive anymore, that's when the hard part starts, because you're like, whoa, I don't know how to interact with people. I don't know how to get over these abandonment issues. I don't know how to get over this anxiety of not knowing where I'm going to be tomorrow. And that takes a lot of work. And I know that all of us on the YAB have had the time, thankfully, to do that. But without his name is Tree, and the other people at our high school, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have this stable job. I wouldn't have my stable housing. I wouldn't have finished my first year of college and actually done well, better than I ever did before. So that I just want to share those resources with people as well, just because when you're homeless or come from a poor family, like, you don't think college or a higher education is in the cards for you. You don't think that it's an achievable goal, so you don't even try a lot of the time. But there's a lot of resources out there that people don't know about and that really need to be shared. And that's a big thing with us and doing that outreach. It's so important for people to know what resources they have, learn that there's a safe place they could go, learn that there's people who want to listen to them and help them. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. Yeah, I mean, what I heard is like just showing up, right? Like having someone who shows up and like that human connection of someone that you can be vulnerable with and feel comfortable enough to be like, I am struggling, and someone who listens and then kind of helps you like outline what your goals are and helping you achieve those goals and showing you like what's possible, right? Because yeah, when you're surviving, like how are you supposed to think about college when you're like, what's happening tomorrow? So sounds really great. And I'm grateful for the people in your lives who showed up because it sounded like they were a big influence for you. So we as the Yab, I'm not part of the Yab, but the Yab did a training about a year and a half ago on adultism. And adultism describes the systems of privileged attitudes, beliefs, values, and behaviors that adults have over those of young people. We sometimes see it play out when youth and young adults are stereotyped and discriminated against bias because of their age. So Bev, I know, talked a little about that, and Brandon talked a little bit about it too, in their experience with homelessness and housing insecurity and how that kind of played out. And so we actually also just did a YHDP training on adultism to just kind of show that like adultism is driven by behaviors and attitudes that are based on the assumption that adults are better than young people. And so it entitles them to act upon or behalf of young people without their agreement. And so the whole point of the Yab is to like be like, no, we are youth, we have the experience, we have the expertise, and we need to be part of these decisions and part of, how people improving systems, right? Improving the services and improving all of those things. So since we've talked a lot about adultism and you guys have experienced it, I've seen you experience it. I'm sure I slip up too sometimes, but can you talk about how it fosters a lack of comfort in accessing agency support? So tell us a time you experienced adultism and how can agencies better support youth and young adults in creating a more welcoming environment. Lily, do you want to start this time?
Yeah, I can do that. So sorry, my dog just barked. One instance that I experienced adultism, and this is one of my more recent times, was while I was enrolled in the transition in place programs. I had a previous caseworker. We had a new caseworker start, and she's great. But this older caseworker, I'll call her C, she shamed me in front of the new caseworker to try and prove her authority or something like that. But it was so upsetting to me. I considered quitting the programs that day or that week. I had gone out and gotten my nails done, and that was my only self-care thing that I had done for 2 years, and I always made sure I had the money for it. And yes, it was a learning experience for me. Oh, I should probably stop getting my nails done since I'm getting government assistance from these programs. Yes, but the way she treated me was like belittling me. Like I literally, when I was sitting there in that office, I felt like I was just wanted to melt into the floor. I just wanted to disappear and like, and it wasn't like a super big deal, but this caseworker made it into one. And it was really hard for me to take the learning experience away from that because I felt so attacked. I think if she had approached me differently, it would have been so much better. And I would have been more receptive to her advice.
Great. And Lily, are there ways that you think agencies can better support youth and young adults by creating a more welcoming environment?
Yes, I do. Sorry, my baby's crying. Can you come back to me?
Yeah, I'll come back to you. Brandon?
Hit the mute button like 3 too many times there.
That's fine. We all are still figuring out Zoom 2 years later.
Yeah, weird. But yeah, as far as adultism goes, I really feel like a lot of that stems from the parents. Like something my mom used to say to me all the time was that I was legally an extension of herself, like an arm or a leg, and that I was literally her property. And she said this to me all the time. And the hardest part about it was the fact that she was totally right. Like it didn't matter what I wanted or what I said to her. If she said something different, then that was the way it was, and I couldn't be considered my own person by anyone to anyone. But if that's the angle I'm taking on adultism, I don't really think the agencies can do much about the parent problem. So like, all I want to say is that everyone should do a little bit they can to treat these people like they're people, and not just some unfinished portrait being drawn by older authorities. And to not try and be that older authority either, because they are people and they are complete people. They're just changing people who may lack experience. I mean, part of me even thinks I was smarter back then, which isn't true at all. But I still felt real enough at that point to where that was a real question I had to ponder for a while. But yeah, I feel like anybody that doesn't see youth like that, doesn't see them as complete people, just has been out of touch with that part of themselves for way too long, or just lacks the memories of their streams of consciousness from that era, in my opinion.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. Danny?
So I had a lot of memories to choose from. I had never known the term adultism before we started talking about it in the Yab and everything. But the most recent memory that I have is I've had a lot of problems my whole life with my aunt, just her being a very mean person. And in the last 6 months, I've matured a lot as a person, and just like getting my professionalism to where I want it to be, and able to not take things personally. So I was with her and we got into a fight over something little, but I made a point to be very similar to how I'm talking to you guys right now, not being too assertive, not being the bitch that she was calling me. Basically, I didn't want her to be right, basically, but her big thing has always been like, oh, your age may say that you're an adult, but you always will act like a kid. And it doesn't affect me anymore, just because, first of all, she's been saying it my whole life. So I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, okay, whatever. But also it's like, I'm comfortable enough in myself that I know my experiences are valid. And just being the youngest kid out of older siblings, like I was probably 12 or 13 when my sister got married, and then 15 when my brother got married. So, not having any cousins or anything. So when I was at their wedding, being the only one who wasn't allowed to drink, that's made, that confusing into my adulthood, because to me, that was what adults did, but they wouldn't ever let me be one, even though I was expected to act like an adult does. Like I was expected to cook for myself, clean for myself, clean my room, like do my homework by myself. And there was a lot of expectations of being an adult, but the big problem has always been not being treated like one. it's like, well, you want me to be all mature and be an adult, but you won't treat me like a equal. And that's it's a huge problem, to be completely honest. And like Brandon said, there's not much that agencies can do about parents. It's kind of just the luck of the draw, unfortunately. So having the safe space and the outreach so the children and young adults know their options and their options for a safe place and, you know, away from their family, because that's been a big theme, is that, you know, we just didn't feel another way out. The only way out was going to live on the streets, you know? So when it gets to that point, it would have been really great if I knew about like Montana Legal Services or some of the other resources in the area that would have given me that safe space, so I didn't feel so alone. Yeah, adultism, it's crazy, because it's like even sometimes I feel myself doing that to people younger than me now. You know, we're a product of our environment, and I genuinely believe that we can have control of our emotions and everything. But yeah, it's just, I see myself doing it, so that's something that I've definitely tried to go away from and change my brain about that, because I don't believe in it, and I don't think it's ever okay really in any instance to treat a young adult or a child any different than that. So
Danny, before you mute, do you have any suggestions on how agencies can create a more welcoming environment?
I think something that I lacked in Kalispell was like lack of outreach. I really didn't know that there were any resources up there until I joined the YAB. And I think it's important to, I mean, it could be as easy as this. You could message the health teacher at the high school and be like, hey, do you need something to fill a day of your class? Like, I want to come in and tell the kids in the class about the resources, and also just like take questions and everything, and then show them that there's a place that they can go. That's why the outreach is important, because without the outreach, they're not going to know that it's a safe place to go.
Yeah. And I think what we've talked about a lot is the YAB is like not the typical outreach, not like agency to agency referrals, right?
Mhm.
Like I actually know Lisa Beavers is on this call, and they like go to the skate parks and offer food just to meet people, right? Like going outside of the normal routes, because if you're not accessing resources, then you're not going to get referred to where you need to go, right? So thanks, Danny. Bev.
Yeah. I would say so. Back when I lived in Billings, there was like a faith-based organization that did like food distribution stuff in our neighborhood. And yeah, I was like going into high school, and just the amount of like mistrust and fear like that came with trying to get food from these people was really hard. Like there was always a lot of questions about like, well, what are you going to do with this food? And like, you know, like, do you really have like a younger sibling that needs this, that is watching like a baby right now? You know, like, yeah, just there was so much like mistrust, and I felt like every time we had to go over there was like a little bit of panic of like, I have to have a good excuse because I know these like adults don't believe me. Which yeah, just put up so many barriers to like actually asking for connections to like other sorts of supports, because yeah, they also said like, you know, oh, we have connections to like other agencies in town that can help with other things, like we only do this one sort of thing, but there's other stuff. But like the yeah, just like a lack of, you know, like the lack of trust made it really hard to actually even access the one service that they were offering. And then there was also little things about like, you know, like questioning the food choices that we were making. You know, they're like, oh, you young people like don't know, you know, like what foods you need to eat. And like as someone that had like an eating disorder, like that was like a thing that, you know, just like didn't seem to even pass their or like come up for them as something to like think about. Like, yeah, it just felt like constantly being monitored and like having to justify like why I was using services, which is like, why are you even providing services if you're just going to be, yeah, like doubting the youth you're supposed to be helping, right? Yeah, and I think like, I don't know, I think in some cases it's fair for like services to have questions about why you're asking for like certain things. But I think just like really like services should explain like why they're asking questions that they're asking. I think that can help like actually build trust with agencies, so that they can actually get to the roots of like the needs that youth have in situations. Yeah, instead of just like assuming what those like root needs are and then trying to meet them without actually having conversations with the youth. Like, yeah, that was something that has come up kind of time and time again.
Yeah, kind of context, like, why are you asking these questions? And it's like, oh, because we get a lot of funding and it's not tied to your name, you know, like type of thing. Yeah, that makes sense.
Something that that reminded me of when Bev was saying that all you really have to do is explain why, just like you would to another adult. You don't have to be the classic, you know, because I'm the adult, that's why. It's like, I would like to know why I'm doing what you're telling me to do. Just like you would tell an adult why you're doing what you're doing, why you're making this decision. So yeah, the big, you know, I'm an adult, that's why. That's really the biggest.
Yeah. Lily, do you have suggestions on how agencies can be a more welcoming environment?
I do, and I think this kind of goes with what all of us have been saying, so maybe it was a good thing Marigold started crying because let me like compose my thoughts. But I think being trauma informed, if you're going to work with youth, especially if you're going to work with youth that are in these sorts of programs, like we wouldn't be in these programs if there wasn't issues at home, if we didn't actually need the help. But yeah, I guess my situation that I had talked about, just that caseworker shaming me in front of somebody else, that just was really triggering for me because my mom would always shame me, and that was like a tactic to control me and make sure that I did what my parents wanted. And so yeah, it was very triggering, and it kind of created this barrier that was unnecessary and didn't need to be there. If this caseworker, I'm not sure if she was capable or willing to be at that level of trauma informed, but that's what me and the other clients in my program needed and do need. If you can prevent, or at least try your best to prevent like further traumatization when you're working with youth, that's going to go a long way. If you can finally create that safe space for somebody, create like that trust relationship with them, it's going to give people like me and the other people in the Yab, it gives us a chance to like take a deep breath, understand that we're safe, collect ourselves, and start healing and moving forward, instead of just continuing to be in survival mode. So yeah, I think that's huge. And the people in my life that have helped me are trauma informed and caring and understanding. And without that, I know that youth aren't going to be as receptive, and it's just going to make your life harder.
Yeah, thanks. One other thing that's come up, I know in your conversations that I just want to put a plug in, is just really learning about the special populations you're working with. So kids aging out of foster care, people who identify as LGBTQ+, anti-racism training, like all of those things. So when people do walk into your door, you're using pronouns, you know, you're using like language that feels comfortable, and those types of things, I think are the other big thing that the YAB has really, like, last year kind of curated all these trainings for grantees to be like, these are things that, you know, we care about. And, oh, you have communal housing, like, is it gender neutral, right? Like, is it like, what color are the boys' rooms and the girls' rooms? And, you know, trying to just create a little bit more flexibility in that realm too. Well, I just want to say that concludes like my questions to you. And I want to say, before anyone jumps off, we are going to have time for questions. You can drop them in the chat, but I just want to thank Brandon, Lily, Danny, and Bev for like being open, being vulnerable, saying what you experienced, because you didn't have to do this. You volunteered to do this. And I just appreciate you like kind of putting yourselves out there, because it's not easy. So I would love, please drop your questions in the chat and we will address them. Specific questions for any YAB member or the YAB in general. Lots of thank yous. Questions about outreach, questions about how to create that safe space, how to create that connection. What would you describe as low barrier access to housing from your perspective?
I have an answer for that.
Okay.
So obviously it depends on what sorts of youth you're helping, but I can provide an example with the programs that I've been involved in. Having, sorry, my thought just left my head. This baby is distracting. Making sure that you're not putting a bunch of barriers in place. How many steps are involved before you can house somebody? How many, yeah, and also something that we had been looking into with someone that we're helping with the YAB is how are you getting people to your facility, or how are you meeting with potential clients? What does your outreach look like? Because if they're having an issue with transportation, which with the gas prices and everything is a struggle, if they can't even get to your building, that's a barrier. Just like little things like that. It might not be something you think about, especially like if you've always had a reliable vehicle at all, but a lot of youth in situations like this might not have those sorts of resources.
Any other YAB members want to talk about how you describe low barrier access to housing?
I think private landlords are huge. The person I started working with after I turned 18, he was a very understanding and a very good guy. And I met with him once. Well, I met with him a lot more than that now, obviously. But when I met with him about the place, I told him I had no credit. I told him I had no renter history. I told him like I needed to get into a new place in the next few days. Otherwise, I would have to get all my stuff somewhere and just live on the street again. And then he really liked me and he just put me in a nice place, kind of a nice place. It was a cheap place. And he was always very kind to me and is still working with me. So I think that sort of thing really starts at the heart of the person you're getting a place from. But as far as like, you know, the housing programs go, I don't know much about those, honestly, because I never went with any of those. But the fewer barriers, the better, definitely. I feel like people would be a lot less likely to seek out those programs if, you know, it seems like a really stressful process.
Mm-hmm. Great. Adam from Tumbleweed and Billings, who's a YHDP grantee, asked, in your communities, do you see opportunities for outreach where agencies are not yet going? Danny's got opinions.
How'd you know? it just amazes me, like it just feels like there's always like a problem finding clients, but that's just because like I think it's really important to allocate a budget to outreach because like one of us said earlier, you can't rely on resource to resource like sharing and referrals. So you really have to, it's not even you really have to go super out of your way. You can maybe talk to the clients that you are already serving and kind of get their current status quo. Where are they hanging out, you know, and whether that be like the skate park or trying to think of some other places. I don't really have any more off the top of my head, but I think you could definitely use your clients as a resource to find the places where you could go do outreach. And then once you're there, it's really easy. I mean, like go to Costco, go spend $150, $200 on a bunch of like hot dogs or something, and, you know, go out and pass out free food and then be like, hey, if you're at this point in time where you want resources, then here you go, here's our card kind of thing. Because like I said, I did not know about any resources before I joined the YAB. And if I knew that they were there, I would have used them. But that was the main thing.
Bev, do you have any suggestions?
Keep your intake forms short. Make sure they're not just Word documents, because not everyone has access to Word. I feel like that's something I've had some friends struggle with. And I guess like something I see in Missoula sometimes is like there are youth who are homeless that aren't being like catered to as like youth, right? Like they're just being given the same services as adults. Yeah, and I think that like youth have like different situations. Like a lot of us don't have like good credit or have no credit or like renter's history and things like that. And then so there's just like, yeah, there's people falling through gaps because they aren't being catered to like as youth because they like present more as an adult or something like that, you know? Yeah, and I think that puts up that just like you're not acknowledging barriers that are there because of their age.
Yeah, that makes sense. One other thing that worked in Chicago that I just want to note is that they paid like local leaders and like local just known youth to post Instagram posts. They got like $25 gift cards for every 2 posts. And so it was peer-to-peer sharing of resources versus agency sharing of resources. And that's worked really well in other communities and something I think Montana could try. Logan asked, what are ways that the YAB wants to engage with housing in the future?
So I think something that all of us enjoy, because obviously we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't enjoy it. So I've just felt that we've kind of taken a lot more on, but we all really like it because we're all super passionate. And so for me, at least, I want to continue working and building more networks with landlords and real estate agents to help out and be the best consultant I can be. And we're really just here for everyone. Like, shoot us an email, ask us to join in on a meeting or something. You know, we're very open and very willing to help. And something we all have is a common goal. You know, we all want this to get better. We all want housing insecurity to become less common. So yeah, it's just, we're definitely going to become more and more involved, I think.
Great. Any other? If you look at their website too, I'll just plug that they have their goals. So one is accountability, education, outreach, and then policy work. are kind of their 4 big goals that they came up with for the next couple of years. So if you need people to testify at legislature next year, like please call the YAB, right? Or things like that, I think. But I love this question because I think this dovetails is, do you have any suggestions or resources for young people dealing with adultism from landlords?
I know that Montana Legal Services or Resources, they can help with some of that. They came and spoke with some of my clients a couple months back, and they had a lot of really interesting things to say. A lot of great tips and tricks for the ins and outs of what you can and can't do with landlords, stuff like that.
Great.
I think it's really important for the agencies in the area to network with landlords and kind of show, first of all, being a landlord myself, there's some pros to working with agencies. You're for sure going to get rent on time every month. You're able to help the community, which always looks good. And I mean, you're actually making a difference. And to landlords, the main thing is they're just going to be getting their rent on time every month. And that's really just a little bit of outreach you need to do and explain to them that this is really good for them, you know. And I know quite a few people that would definitely think that that's a great idea. And yeah.
Brandon or Bev, that kind of dovetails into this next question too, of how do we help youth homelessness with our housing shortage, right? Like,
I was on the WOVA and I was looking at the articles and everything that people were sending. And, you know, we were talking about manufactured homes, but then somebody sent a pallet home article, and I had never ever heard of these before, but I was reading it and I was like, wow, like this is cool. Like this could definitely help. It doesn't take a lot of land, you know, people can have their own space and there wouldn't be a lot of conflicts. So I think things are going really interesting ways with just developers wanting to create affordable housing, but then there's also those developers that want to create that $1 million housing that they just like don't care. But with the resources coming from the agencies and, you know, the YHDP grant, I think the article said that they're like 10,000 a piece. So that just could make it really easy. It's really easy to put these together. Like it would be quick and efficient. And because we're definitely going to need to look at other ways for housing, especially in Montana, because Montana, you know, there's the only tall buildings are in Billings. So we don't have that like a lot of other states do have, because a lot of other states, they just stack up so they can fit more people. But we don't really have that here. Luckily, though, we do have a lot of land where we could put manufactured homes or these pallet homes.
awesome. Brandon, do you have thoughts working with a landlord that is awesome?
Well, if you're dealing with adultism from a landlord and like, I don't know, they're not doing anything illegal, you can't really make somebody change their mind about something. It all depends on the situation, circumstance, and who you're working with. But as far as like housing ideas for youth, even though we're going through this massive housing shortage, I really wish I had an answer to that. I really wish anyone had an answer to that, really. But really, if there are no places, there are no places, and you just got to know the programs and the agencies, and you got to rely on those. And if you're in a really tight spot, you really got to work with that sort of thing.
Yeah, one grant program we have that I should mention is a host home model. So they find folks who will essentially rent out a room to someone, kind of create that home base, right? Because I think like people keep talking about building affordable housing, but like we just don't have housing now. And so the host home model is really interesting in that you have this network of 5 or 7 people you call and you say, hey, you know, we have someone, and then you help out, you provide money to help out their bills, so that they can have a safe place for a little bit. So I think that's a really interesting model. Bev or Lily, do you have any thoughts on the housing shortage and how to help?
I think the biggest way to help is to be creative. Each part of Montana, I think, is going to have different struggles depending on, you know, what the housing options are. But yeah, just being creative. Maybe you can't house as many people, but how can you get them set up to get there or whatever? Yeah, like find an option. If they can't get their own apartment, how can we get you set up renting a room? How can we get you housed in an Airbnb for the moment? Whatever that looks like. But creativity is, I think, the answer to the crisis that we're in.
Bev?
Yeah, I would say something that like I think would be helpful is like if you know people that run Airbnbs, like ask them to turn that into more permanent housing. Yeah, like people need rooms now, and like we need to prioritize the needs of people who are like actually facing housing insecurity. Yeah, like it's a huge problem in Missoula. Like there, yeah, are so many homes that are like unoccupied, but they're Airbnbs, you know, so just like, and I think that service providers can pull some weight in their personal lives in ways that could be like super beneficial to be like, hey, it's actually kind of unethical right now to be like running 4 Airbnbs as an individual while in a housing crisis. Maybe not everyone's ready to have that sort of discussion, but yeah, like those are kind of some of the solutions I see.
And bringing a youth who's experienced homelessness to that meeting, right? I think like some Yab said, I'll come talk to landlords and be like, I am the face, like I've paid my, you know, rent on time. I'm building my credit. Like I'm not a shitty tenant, right? Like it's harder to say no when you look at someone in the face, I think is another tactic that folks have tried. So that is all we have for today. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your great questions and the resources that you shared among each other. And Danny, Bev, Lily, and Brandon also for your time. You all have full-time jobs. And so I appreciate you carving out time for us today. Really insightful and really thoughtful feedback that I hope will help these folks as they work to improve their services.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. It was an awesome panel. Over 60 people attended. That's awesome. Quite a lot of interest. We're now going to have a lunch break, and then at 1 o'clock there'll be some more sessions. And you can always continue using the Hoover app or whatever it's called. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for a great session.
Thank you.
Later.